Believe it or not, this restaurant is ours, and it's meant for my oldest son and his wife. If you don't like it, then get a divorce," yelled my husband in a fit of rage. Following him, my husband's brother, now called Mike, made his arrogant claim. "I'm part of this family too, you know? Surely, I deserve some part in the restaurant." Not to be left out, Mike's wife, Karen, also berated me. "You don't deserve to run such a fine establishment. Get out already." I felt a surge of anger within me. I couldn't care less about what happened to these people. I decided there and then to put them in their place, once and for all. The first order of business, to correct their misguided notions. I can't help but smirk at the thought of the look on their faces when they find out the truth. My name is Natalie Farrell. At 35, I'm running a sushi restaurant. I have many regular customers, and thankfully, the business is doing well. The shop was originally started by my grandparents. Both of my parents passed away from illness when I was young, so my grandparents became my guardians. As I helped out in the shop, I became interested in becoming a sushi chef and taking over the shop. After graduating from culinary school, I started working in the restaurant immediately. I learned how to make sushi from my grandfather and how to serve customers from my grandmother. Thanks to their guidance, I became a competent chef and developed proper etiquette. For a while, the three of us ran the shop, but when I turned 23, a man named Steve Farrell came to our shop. He was 5 years older than me. He used to be a sushi chef, but the shop he had been working at had closed down, so he was looking for a new job. My grandparents were considering retirement due to their old age. They had mentioned that they wanted one more employee, so we decided to hire him. His skills were undeniable, and he quickly became a valuable asset. I learned a lot from him, and we eventually grew close and got married when I was 25. My grandparents thought Steve was a reliable and honest man, and they felt secure with him. Our married life went well, and after my grandparents retired, we continued to run the shop together, supporting each other. However, when I was 31, my grandmother passed away from an illness. The following year, my grandfather also passed away. Since then, my husband's attitude started to change gradually. When I was in the kitchen, he would become grumpy and started saying things like, "You should focus on serving the customers. I want to hone my sushi making skills. So, I want to be in the kitchen as much as possible." Since he was so passionate about sushi, I understood and began to take over more of the serving duties. However, the real reason behind my husband's change of attitude was something different. About half a year later, I overheard him saying something on the phone. "Natalie is a woman, right? I don't like the fact that she's a sushi chef." I was very sad. I was shocked to learn that my loving husband thought this way about me. Sushi is a traditional dish, and there's a strong tradition of male dominance in this field. Therefore, the number of female sushi chefs is low. However, this attitude is starting to change, and there are more restaurants accepting female chefs. And I believe I'm able to provide sushi that satisfies our customers. I wish he wouldn't dislike me just because I'm a woman. After hanging up the phone, my husband finally noticed my presence and hastily tried to gloss over his comments. I was just stressed out and said it without thinking. "I promise I won't say it again. Will you forgive me?" Seeing him seemingly regretful, I decided to forgive him. However, my husband started causing more problems. One day, I noticed that $3,000 had been withdrawn from our savings account. When I confronted him, he said, "My brother Mike lost his job, and I had to help him out. He's family, after all. There's nothing we can do." Frankly, I didn't like it. The reason being, Mike is a problematic person. He initially aimed to be a chef but quit early due to the rigorous training, and has been job hopping ever since. Every time we met, he would ask for money, and he gave off a very irresponsible impression. His wife, Karen, also can't hold a job. Despite this, she always has an aggressive attitude towards me, saying things like, "You must be so tired from working all the time. I'm a housewife, so I enjoy my free life." I wondered if there was any need to support these people with hundreds of thousands of dollars. They are adults, and they are healthy. I wish they could figure it out for themselves. Our restaurant was profitable, but our savings were steadily decreasing. At first, when I pointed out to him that he was giving too much, he seemed to reflect on his behavior and said, "Sorry." But later on, he said, "Natalie, you're the one managing our savings and household budget, right? You should just manage it better," and refused to listen to my advice. The situation with my husband was getting worse, and I was starting to worry seriously about our future savings. I briefly considered divorce, but eventually decided against it. Steve is an excellent craftsman, and without him, our restaurant would suffer. Besides, Steve has always been a responsible person. I clung to this thin hope that he would pull himself together someday. Later, I would realize how naive this thought was. Years have passed since my grandparents passed away, and we arrive at the present day. At this point, an event occurred that I could no longer tolerate. On our restaurant's day off, while I was doing the laundry at home, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, there stood Mike and Karen. "Hey. From today on, I can eat sushi every day now, right? Lucky me." Their words made no sense. As I was at a loss, Steve appeared and I demanded an explanation. Casually, he said, "They'll be living with us for a while from today on." I was even more confused. Upon further inquiry, I learned that Mike and Karen were in dire financial straits and couldn't even afford their apartment rent. Upon learning this, Steve had taken it upon himself to allow them to stay with us for a while. What's more, neither Mike nor Karen were working, so we were expected to cover their living expenses as well. I told Steve, "Don't make decisions like that without discussing with me first." But he shrugged it off, saying, "They're our family, so it doesn't matter." And so, their cohabitation began forcibly. Needless to say, my stress levels skyrocketed. Not only this, but Steve took Mike and Karen to a restaurant and allowed them to eat expensive sushi for free. They ate up sushi without a care in the world, chattering and making noise. Steve even announced in front of our other customers, "I'll treat my brother and Karen." Even our regular customers seemed to find this odd. One of our regulars, a man named Tucker, frowned and warned Steve. "Steve, it's not right to let them eat for free just because they're your family. It will affect the restaurant's business, won't it?" Steve pretended to reflect upon his words, saying, "I'm sorry. Tucker is our regular customer, and we've been close since I was a child. He's like a beloved grandfather to me. And he's always there for me, saying, 'If you ever have a hard time, feel free to talk to me.'" However, despite Tucker's warning, Steve didn't stop giving preferential treatment to Mike and Karen. Steve never scolded Mike and always showed a soft smile towards Karen. Watching Steve like this, a suspicion began to form in my mind. I hoped I was just misunderstanding, but my suspicion would later prove correct. When my stress was at its breaking point, a major incident occurred. One day off, Steve, Mike, and Karen told me they had important news. "Actually, we've decided to hand over our restaurant to Mike and Karen. It's been Mike's dream to become a chef, and we thought it would be a good idea." I felt dizzy. Running a restaurant is tough. I couldn't believe that Mike and Karen could manage it, and I didn't want to give the restaurant that we inherited from our grandparents to people like them. I firmly told them. Then, Steve, Mike, and Karen all became furious. Steve yelled at me loudly. "That's my restaurant. What I do with it is my business. Whether you like it or not, the restaurant will belong to Mike and Karen. If you don't like it, get a divorce." Mike also arrogantly said, "I'm part of the family too, right? Just give me the restaurant." Karen berated me saying, "You're not worthy of that restaurant. Get out quickly." I was filled with intense anger. I no longer cared what happened to these people. I decided to retaliate against them once and for all. First, I decided to correct the three's misunderstanding. I chuckled to myself, wondering what their faces would look like once they learned the truth. "I don't know what you guys are misunderstanding, but the restaurant is something I inherited from my grandparents. It's in my name, so I can't transfer it to Steve, Mike, or Karen." As I explained this, my husband looked surprised. "But I'm your husband. I should have the right to do as I please with the restaurant. Inheritances go to blood relatives. Since we don't have children, my inheritance is mine alone." Steve finally seemed to understand the mechanics of inheritance and was stunned. I was almost dumbfounded by his lack of common sense. Because Steve was so dedicated to sushi, he lacked some common knowledge. I've often felt this way in our married life. Then, Mike started to make a fuss. "Hey, you should have explained this beforehand." I finally raised my voice in anger. "What? You guys were the ones who proceeded with the conversation based on your misunderstandings. You didn't even give me the time to explain. What are you saying?" Annoyingly, Mike tried to counter further. "But we don't care about whose name it's in. We can run the restaurant on our own. You're no longer needed, so get out." I really decided to leave. If I stayed here any longer, I thought I might explode with anger. I packed only the essentials, said, "Goodbye," and stormed out of the house. After leaving the house, I initially stayed in a cheap business hotel. There, I strategized about what to do next. I had no desire to make amends with Steve. I had finally realized that the kind Steve was nowhere to be found. I don't know if that was his true nature or if something had twisted his personality. But suddenly, I felt foolish for trusting such a horrible man. I wanted to punish him. I also wanted Mike and Karen to leave my house. I wondered how I could drive them out. After thinking about it, I made various calls and formally launched a revenge plan. I also went out for a bit, and after about a week, my preparations were complete, so I returned home. Seeing me, Steve and the couple looked triumphant. Steve smirked and looked at me. "Hey, finally reflecting and came back, huh? But returning in just a week, you lack resolve." Hearing this, the couple laughed heartily. Suppressing my anger, I showed them several photos. They were stunned at that moment, but Steve and Karen's faces turned pale. Meanwhile, Mike asked in confusion, "What are these photos?" "These are photos proving Steve and Karen's affair," I declared in a cold tone. The photos showed Steve and Karen walking arm in arm, appearing to enjoy themselves. The other photos also captured their intimate moments. Mike finally seemed to understand the situation and began to blush in anger. "Hey, what is this? You've betrayed me with an affair." Mike's anger was fierce. However, Steve didn't apologize but instead doubled down. "Shut up. It can't be helped, I fell in love. You were wandering around outside, and I happened to go out with Karen." Karen also began making pitiful faces. It's your fault for not working. Compared to that, Steve is a respectable artisan. It's clear who I would choose. Karen hasn't been working either, and Steve, who's having an affair, is not someone trustworthy at all. I was beyond angry and more disgusted. The three of them had started a low-level argument, and it seemed like it was spiraling out of control. Somehow, I managed to calm them down, despite the frustration bubbling within me. Once he had calmed down a bit, my husband glared at me. How did you get these photos? You've been following us? No, I replied. I hired a detective to gather evidence of your affair. That's how I got these pictures. So, that's why I had been visiting a detective agency. My husband ranted, hiring a detective is cowardly. But the real coward was my adulterous husband. Well, it's unlikely he'd understand that. Then Mike asked a question. How did you realize my brother was having an affair? You must have suspected something to hire a detective. I let out a chuckle. Of course, I could tell. We are married, after all. I noticed right away how excessively sweet he was acting around Karen. The smile he had for her was completely different from the one he showed me or our customers. My husband was speechless. He must have thought he wouldn't get caught. In his shock, he revealed too much in front of my grandparents, how he'd acted as innocent as a cat, how he had married me for my shop, how he didn't really love me, and so on. I looked at him coldly, my heart aching. Despite loving you so much, I was betrayed by you. I've endured a lot of pain. Do you understand how much I've suffered? Can you imagine how much you've made me worry? At my harsh words, my husband finally fell silent. He looked remorseful, but I had no intention of forgiving him. Steve and Karen were silent too, probably feeling awkward. Finally, there was some quiet, and I continued. I will be claiming damages from both Karen and Steve. Be prepared. At these words, Karen erupted. Wait! I have no money! How can you claim damages from someone like me? I cut off Karen's words. All you have to do is work and earn money. You can pay in installments. It's inconceivable to hurt someone and not make amends. Karen, looking shocked, could only manage a week. Okay. And then fell silent again. I took out the divorce papers I had already filled out and made my husband fill in the necessary parts. All I have to do now is submit these to the office, and I can say goodbye to the bothersome man. The matter of the affair was now more or less settled. However, there was still something left to be done by the three of them. I asked them, You didn't just cause me trouble, did you? The three of them looked clueless. They really didn't seem to understand, so I reluctantly explained. You treated the customers of our shop poorly, right? I've been in regular contact with our regulars over the past week, and they all voiced their complaints. The main complaints were that despite the many mistakes, they never apologized, and they loudly insulted customers in the staff-only area. There was even a claim that Mike tried to steal change. When I told them about these complaints, their faces turned pale. Since you've caused so much trouble for our valued customers, I'll have you apologize. I'm going to call our regulars now and have you apologize. I pulled out my phone and started making calls. First, I briefly explained the situation, and then my husband, Mike, and Karen apologized, in that order. We repeated this process several times. All of our regulars were understandably angry at the three, so the apology took much longer than expected. I knew Tucker's address, so I had them go and apologize to him directly. When Tucker saw the three, he raised his voice. You were absolutely terrible! How dare you face people with that attitude? No matter how delicious your sushis are, I will never have them again.
Then, he looked at me and smiled kindly.
Natalie, you should cut ties with these people. Even if Steve leaves, a more skilled artisan will come to your place.
Yes, I'm divorcing my husband too. Thank you for all your help. I'm truly grateful. Before carrying out this plan, I had also sought advice from Tucker, which had proven immensely helpful. I thanked him deeply. After leaving Tucker's house, I made sure to let Mike, Steve, and Karen know that I had reported all their misdeeds, including their infidelity, to our regulars.
You three might want to continue working as chefs, but I don't think our regulars will be visiting your restaurant. If they tell others, those people probably won't either,
I said, adding insult to injury. Even if the three didn't run a restaurant, the mental damage of their embarrassment being known to so many people would be significant. I told them to pack their things and get out immediately, which they did. After they were kicked out, they seemed to get into a heated argument about what to do next. They were making such a commotion in the street that the police were called and they were taken away. They were trouble to the end. The three didn't end up with criminal records, but they did split up and started living separately. Mike and Karen got divorced too. I submitted the divorce papers to the government office and cleanly cut ties with my husband. Mike is still unemployed and living a poor life. I heard he's struggling daily to dodge debt collectors because of the substantial debt he owes. As I promised, I demanded alimony from my husband and Karen. Karen seems to have found a job for now. However, she was unemployed for a long time, so she can't suddenly become a high earner, and her salary seems to be quite low compared to her peers. My husband also managed to find a job and relocated to a remote state where he didn't know anyone. Yet, rumors have a way of leaking out, and their past wrongdoings became known, leaving them with no place to hide. In particular, my husband and Karen have to keep working to pay their debts. I imagine their days are tougher than they expected. I hope they suffer. Even after my husband left, the restaurant is doing well. My regulars, who learned about the incident, started coming to the restaurant more frequently to support me. I had fewer chances to be in the kitchen due to my husband, but I've been practicing in secret, so my skills haven't deteriorated. The enjoyable days have returned, and I am living a fulfilling life. We've also gained a new employee. She's a girl who just graduated from vocational school. She's still an apprentice and has a lot to learn, but I sense a flair in her. Her attitude towards the customers is excellent, so she's well regarded among the regulars. Since we're both women, we found it easier to connect with each other, and she sometimes confides in me about her worries. I think we're building a good relationship. I even consider having her inherit the restaurant in the future. But I intend to keep doing my best as an active chef for now. While cherishing this restaurant that I inherited from my grandparents, I want to keep growing both as a sushi chef and as an individual.
Did Abigail and Olivia's luggage arrive? From today, we're taking them in.
Thomas, my husband, declared triumphantly over the phone. I was speechless at Thomas's sudden declaration. It seemed like Thomas had only his sister Abigail and her concerns in mind. There wasn't a trace of consideration for me. I thought I might as well leave such a husband.
Yeah, the luggage arrived, and I've just moved into my new place too,
I responded in a deliberately cheerful tone. A new place? Thomas was taken aback by my murmur. My name is Harper. I just turned 50 this year. I work in sales at a major company. My job involves dealing with customer complaints and issues, but it's also very rewarding and fun. I have many clients who have been good to me over the years. After working hard during the week, I tend to relax at home on the weekends. My family consists only of my husband, Thomas. We don't have children. My parents passed away early. We live near the in-laws but aren't very close. It's a relationship of keeping a respectful distance. Thomas loves dining out and often takes his sister Abigail with him to restaurants. Abigail's daughter, Olivia, also joins them. I used to complain to Thomas about this at the beginning of our marriage, because he always seemed to prioritize Abigail and her family over me. However, those feelings gradually faded, because I came to understand Thomas's sincere feelings. I want to repay them for the hard times during our student days. I came to understand Thomas's sincere feelings. In fact, the in-laws' house is poor. They lived in a small, old apartment that was very cramped. Ever since my father-in-law failed in his business venture, that's how they've been living. Even so, Thomas worked hard in his studies. But he didn't get into his first-choice national university. It seems he only got into a private university. Naturally, the in-laws said they couldn't afford to pay for it. That's when Abigail, who was already working, helped out a bit with the tuition. With the help of scholarships, Thomas somehow managed to graduate. So, Thomas is grateful to Abigail for supporting him through tough times. And after getting married, Abigail quit her job. Her husband wanted her to be a housewife. So, the amount of money Abigail could use was limited. After I heard that story, I stopped complaining. I could understand the reason for wanting to give back. I thought I should let Thomas do as he pleases. It's a bit lonely, but it can't be helped. So, I'm going out to eat with Abigail and the others now. Thomas is going out to dine with Abigail and the others today as well. Have a good time. I sent Thomas off with a smile. I thought we would continue to live supporting each other, with Thomas valuing his family. That's what I believed. But our relationship hit a snag 3 months ago. One day, Thomas came to me with a serious look and said, "Actually, Abigail is getting a divorce. It seems she's decided to keep custody of Olivia." Hearing about Abigail's divorce, I was honestly quite troubled. Because Abigail is the type of person I find difficult to deal with. This goes back to when I went to greet the in-laws' house to marry Thomas. Abigail happened to be visiting the in-laws' house at the time.
Thomas, you're marrying someone like this? She's so plain and has terrible taste.
Abigail laughed the moment she saw my face. Thomas and the in-laws didn't say anything. Everyone ignored it. So, I had no choice but to tolerate Abigail's rude behavior. As I remembered these things, Thomas continued, "I'll be going to my parents' house every day for a while to check on them. Abigail is delicate, unlike you, who are thick-skinned. And I'm worried about Olivia too." Thomas casually insulted me. But I didn't argue back. I didn't want to fight with Thomas and have him spend even more time at his parents' house. "Take care." I couldn't say anything else and just saw Thomas off. After that, Thomas started to be away from home more often. He used to come home around 8 p.m. on weekdays. But now, sometimes he doesn't come home until the morning. He's hardly ever at home on weekends. My loneliness just kept growing. "I'm home." When I returned from work and called out, there was no response. The room was pitch dark. Maybe he's at his parents' house again. I became more depressed with Thomas's absence. But when Thomas was home, he started to cause me more trouble. That day, Thomas was unusually at home but made an unreasonable request of me. "I heard from Abigail that you haven't given a housewarming gift yet?" "That's mean. You're about to get your bonus, right? Why don't you buy her a brand name bag or something?" Thomas said it as if it were a matter of course.
Why do I have to give a housewarming gift? Shouldn't you be the one to do it, Thomas?
I responded, but Thomas immediately got angry.
You married me, so you're part of Abigail's family, aren't you? Don't you think it's unreasonable not to even be able to give a family member a gift?
Thomas berated me with those words. Thomas's lecture went on for about an hour after that. In the end, he said,
Anyway, make sure you give a present to Abigail and Olivia, all right?
And then he left the house. He was probably heading to his parents' house. I've never received anything from Abigail, I murmured softly. Later, I got a call from Abigail. Hello? You heard from Thomas, right? You really don't get it. Normally, you give a housewarming gift. Abigail said it as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I was irritated by her selfishness. So, I countered. But you've never done anything for us, have you? Even at our wedding, we didn't receive any congratulatory money from you. At the wedding, Abigail said with a smile, handing over an empty envelope. We're family, so we don't need congratulatory money, right? Abigail said with a smile, handing over an empty envelope. But this is empty, isn't it? Even when I asked, Abigail remained unfazed. I did buy the envelope, though. Aren't I kind? Abigail said confidently. I was speechless at her incredible lack of common sense. And Abigail had no restraint. She ate a lot of the banquet food and drank several rounds of drinks, not included in the course. When I handed her the catalog gift for the wedding favors, aren't there any no-shows? If there were, I could take home several. Harper, you really don't think things through. She even complained about that. As I remembered these things, Abigail laughed and responded, You're my brother's wife. I don't need to give you anything. You're the lowest in our family hierarchy. You should be honoring me, instead. Now go buy me the latest brand name bag. I was dumbfounded by Abigail's audacity. While I remained silent, Olivia started talking to me. Harper, make sure you buy my bag too. I won't forgive you if it's not a limited edition. By then. Olivia hung up the phone, laughing. This is unbelievable. Why am I the only one subjected to this treatment? I let out a deep sigh. After that, Thomas started to come home even less. When he did come home, he would take money from my wallet. Stop it! Even as I desperately tried to stop him, Thomas didn't care. You're always at home, so she doesn't use money, right? I'll put it to good use. Be grateful. Holding a few bills in his hand, Thomas left the house. I can't take it anymore. I was worn down by Thomas's selfish actions. Then, one day, the doorbell rang, and I opened the front door. Yes. A man who seemed to be a mover said, Is this Thomas's house? We'll start bringing in the boxes right away. He began bringing in a large number of cardboard boxes into the house. I hurried to stop him. Wait a minute. We didn't order this, I informed him. But the mover looked a bit troubled and answered, This is Thomas's house, right? The request came from Thomas himself. I was confused by the mover's reply. What were all these cardboard boxes for? Feeling an indescribable anxiety, I immediately called Thomas. What is it? Fortunately, Thomas picked up right away. In the background, I could hear the crude laughter of Abigail and Olivia. I immediately questioned Thomas. Right now, movers are bringing cardboard boxes into our house one after another. What's going on? Then, Thomas said something unexpected. Did Abigail and Olivia's stuff arrive? From today, we're taking them in. I don't need your opinion on this. Thomas declared this triumphantly over the phone. In the background, Abigail chimed in.
Looking forward to living with you. You don't have kids, so you must be happy to take care of our Olivia, right? You should be grateful.
This old lady as a substitute parent? I'm too embarrassed to even tell my friends. Olivia sounded somewhat indignant. I was speechless at Thomas's sudden declaration. Probably the in-laws' house was too cramped, and Abigail must have pleaded with him. Our house is larger and has spare rooms. They must have known this and asked to stay. It seemed Thomas only had Abigail and her concerns in mind. There wasn't a trace of consideration for me. I thought I might as well leave such a husband. I was determined. As I remained silent, Thomas continued to give orders. More stuff will arrive in a week. We bought new furniture for Abigail and her daughter from an online shop. So, make sure everything is arranged properly. We'll stay at my parents' house until then. We can't live in a room scattered with cardboard boxes. Thomas said this, laughing.
Isn't this too pitiful for Harper? She has to organize our stuff all by herself.
Abigail was also laughing.
Take good care of our precious belongings, okay?
Olivia said this arrogantly. I wanted to end this phone call quickly. Okay. So I said just that and immediately hung up. Right after hanging up. All right, let's do this. I sprang into action immediately. 1 week later. Thomas called again.
Did the additional stuff arrive?
Is the room all organized? Thomas must have been curious about the current state of the house. He seemed somewhat unsettled. So, I smiled brightly. Yes, the stuff arrived, and I've just moved into my new place too. I deliberately responded in a cheerful tone.
A new place?
Thomas was taken aback by my response. In fact, on the day Abigail's stuff first arrived, I immediately started to take action. I went straight to the local real estate agent and demanded,
please find me a place I can move into right away.
Direct discussion. At first, I was turned down. Most properties require some refurbishment before moving in, and immediate occupancy isn't usually possible. However, after checking with several real estate agents, one introduced me to a property. It was a women-only share house. Equipped with an auto-lock system, it was secure and reassuring for a woman to live in. The bathroom, toilet, and kitchen were shared spaces, so electricity and gas were already set up. This meant I could use them from the first day of moving in. A cleaning company regularly cleaned the place, so it was always clean. Additionally, the furniture was provided, so minimal personal belongings were no problem. According to the real estate agent, there was one room available.
I'd like to see the room right away.
I immediately asked the real estate agent. He took me to view the place right then. Then I took a look inside the room.
I'll take this one.
I made an immediate decision. Thomas was noticeably shaken by this news, even over the phone.
You can't just move out on your own, can you? We're married. Apologize to me right now and come back home.
Thomas berated me. Abigail, seemingly agitated, asked,
What's going to happen to our room?
She sounded somewhat hysterical. Olivia too.
Don't mess with me, old lady.
Yelling and getting angry. As I remained silent, Thomas, as if he had an epiphany, said,
Do you think you can just do as you please? You'd be in trouble if we got divorced, you know?
Exactly.
With your age and looks, you won't get married again, right?
Poor, plain Harper. You'll have an unstable future. Serves you right. Abigail spoke as if she was pleased. In the background,
The old lady is finished.
she laughed. Then, Thomas said triumphantly, "If you apologize sincerely to us now, we might forgive you. We're kind, unlike you." They mocked me. In the background, Abigail and the others were shouting in agreement. So, I retorted,
The one who should be apologizing is you, Thomas. I know about the affair.
Thomas was clearly flustered. In fact, Thomas had been having an affair for over 3 months. The other woman was a female colleague from his workplace.
How did you find out? I thought it was absolutely secret.
Thomas asked tentatively, as if fearful. He was convinced it would never be discovered. So, it's no wonder Thomas reacted that way. Being kind, I decided to enlighten him. I hired a detective, just in case. You were hardly ever home, right? I thought maybe you were cheating. Lucky me, my hunch was right. I continued while Thomas remained silent. I was surprised when I hired the detective. It seems the investigation was wrapped up in just 3 days? You were meeting your mistress every day, weren't you? It looks like dining out with Abigail and the others was only on your days off. The detective said there were plenty of photos. I said this, laughing. According to the detective, Thomas was gallivanting around with his mistress every day after work. The money he had been taking from my wallet was likely used for his mistress. Thomas and his mistress were always close together, making it easy for the detective to take photos. I'll be divorcing you and seeking compensation. From your mistress too, of course. I'll be sending a formal notice to your workplace, so look forward to it. I told Thomas, laughing. After receiving the detective's report, I immediately went to a law firm. Having concrete evidence, even the law firm was surprised. You. Thomas's voice was clearly irritated. Sending a formal notice to the company would make the contents quite predictable, even if not read. Not only to Thomas, but also to the mistress working at the same company. The affair would likely become known to their colleagues. Hey, Thomas, are you okay? The situation was turning grim, and Abigail sounded anxious. She must have planned to live a comfortable life, relying on Thomas and me to take care of everything. Abigail had been a housewife for a long time and probably couldn't work now. Thomas was her only reliance, understandably. What are we going to do, Thomas? I haven't worked a single day since graduating high school, and there's no way I can start a part-time job now. Olivia seemed somewhat troubled. Thomas, being scolded by Abigail and Olivia, couldn't say anything. I decided to twist the knife further. Thomas probably hasn't saved any money, right? The investigation report said you've been splurging on your mistress, buying her the latest brand name bags. Do you have debts, perhaps? I dropped this bombshell. Thomas was so flustered he couldn't find the words. Ignoring Thomas, Abigail shouted at him.
What? You never buy anything for me, but you buy things for your mistress? This is ridiculous. And now debt? How much do you owe? I hate Thomas so much. He never bought me anything despite all my pleading. Olivia also scolded Thomas in a shrill voice. Abigail and Olivia were making a commotion on the other end of the phone. Harper, I'm truly sorry. Please, do something about these two. Thomas pleaded with me in an exhausted voice. But I had no intention of forgiving Thomas at all. Why don't you handle it yourself? I'm not involved, and it's your responsibility. You better tell your mistress quickly, or the formal notice will reach your company soon. I said to Thomas with a sarcastic smile. Damn! Thomas sounded frustrated. Ignoring him, I continued.
Good luck then. And make sure to pay a hefty compensation." I then hung up the phone. Thomas tried to call me several times after I hung up, but I ignored all his calls. Let Thomas and Abigail struggle all they want. I murmured softly and set Thomas's contact to block. Afterward, my divorce from Thomas was finalized. At first, Thomas resisted. He had been able to live comfortably with both our incomes. But he couldn't maintain the same lifestyle on his income alone. He knew this and didn't want to divorce. However, I had conclusive evidence of Thomas's affair. Ultimately, I made it clear that I had no intention of reconciling and would sue if he didn't agree to the divorce. So Thomas hung his head. I agree to the divorce. And signed the divorce application. Thomas and his cheating partner are then asked for compensation. I decided on the amount after getting information from my lawyer about the market price. So, I believe the amount was fair. In fact, the mistress paid immediately. She explained the situation to her parents and borrowed the money. However, for Thomas, the amount was burdensome. "Can't we reduce the amount?" he asked several times, but ultimately, I refused all of Thomas's requests. During a meeting at the law firm with Thomas, "Should I add on the amount you took from my wallet too?" I asked with a smile, and Thomas turned pale. "That amount is fine." In the end, Thomas agreed, trembling. Afterward, Thomas and his mistress resigned from their company. The affair became known internally, likely due to the formal notices sent. After all, it seems that people around them became aware of the relationship between the two when they sent the proof of contents. Even if you don't know what's inside the envelope, it's an envelope from a lawyer's office. You can probably guess what's inside. In the end, Thomas became uncomfortable and resigned. Maybe he couldn't stand the funny rumors being spread about him within the company. After leaving the company, Thomas worked in day labor through a temp agency. Given his age, it seemed difficult for him to find a new job immediately. But they won't wait for payment. There are living expenses, and he may have to pay compensation in installments. Moreover, there was still a mortgage to pay off. And debts likely incurred for his mistress also came to light. Life must be quite tough for him. Occasionally, I receive messages from Thomas through the lawyer. I was wrong. Please, let's get back together. I'm begging you. Life is so hard, I'm barely making it. If only I had been kinder to you, Harper. Thomas reportedly cried as he spoke to the lawyer. He seems to be in a dire situation, but it's too late for regrets now. And the situation for Abigail and Olivia is also grim. Abigail and Olivia are currently living with Thomas. However, due to Thomas's lack of funds, their living situation is dire. One day, I received a call from Abigail on my cell phone. I had blocked Thomas's number, but not Abigail's, which turned out to be a mistake. Apparently, that backfired. I wondered what the call was now, so I answered the phone. "Hello?" As soon as I picked up, Abigail pleaded with me. "Please, I'm begging you to help us. I'm living with Thomas, but he has no money. Our electricity and gas are going to be cut off, and we have nothing left to eat." Abigail sounded exhausted. I was surprised to hear they were in such dire straits. But I had no intention of helping. So, I coldly rejected her plea. "Why don't you just get a job? You're healthy, Abigail, and you used to work before, right?" Then, presumably Olivia, who must have been next to Abigail, spoke up. "Aren't you being too harsh, Harper? You work at a big company, and you took a lot of money from Thomas and his mistress, so you must have some financial leeway, right? Therefore, you have a duty to take care of Mom and me.
Just tell us your address, and we'll come to you for you to take care of us.
It seemed Olivia still had no intention of working, even now. It was truly appalling, given her youth. Holding back a sigh, I made it clear to her. Now that I'm divorced from Thomas, you and your mother are complete strangers to me. I have no intention of supporting you, and I want nothing to do with you from now on. Don't ever call me again. As soon as I finished speaking, Olivia shouted, "Don't mess with us, old lady. You just shut up and take care of us. Give us your address right now." Abigail and Olivia continued to scream even after that. Their characters are likely never going to change. I have nothing to do with this anymore. Goodbye. With that, I hung up and immediately blocked Abigail's number on my phone. I wanted nothing more to do with them. Given their current trajectory, Abigail and Olivia's situation will likely worsen. But it's a result of their own negligence. I think they deserve to continue suffering. A year later, I decided to leave the share house. It was a bit sad to leave because I had made friends there. The reason for leaving the enjoyable share house was that I decided to get a dog. I encountered the dog at an adoption event, which I attended on a whim, invited by a friend who loves dogs. That's where I had a fateful encounter. While other dogs were being friendly with various people, this one was different. It just kept staring at me. The moment our eyes met, I felt that this dog needed me. I attended the adoption event several times afterward, deepening my bond with the dog. After several visits, I was joyfully allowed to adopt it. However, pets were not allowed in the share house. So regrettably, I had to leave. Now, I live in a pet-friendly apartment. Dogs don't betray, and they're incredibly adorable.
Come here.
The dog runs towards me happily when I call. There may be various difficulties ahead, but I'm not alone anymore. I want to move forward, supporting each other with this beloved dog.